Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Taking Care of Your Temple podcast. I am Dr. Melissa Rich, and I have a great guest today who I will introduce in just a few minutes. First, I want to say some things that I always say at the start of my podcast. This podcast is designed to help women, and I do have some male listeners as well, so you guys, you're welcome, to help people connect with God regularly, to use his power, grace, knowledge, strength, all the things to help them improve their physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being. I have 4 principles that I recommend using in order to do this. The first one, keep our focus on God. Stay focused on him. So, Jerry, how easy is this to do?
In today's world, it can be difficult. Yeah.
There's a lot of distractions.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. And what I find is I constantly have to pull myself back, block out the distractions. And I am not alone. I keep waiting to have a guest who says, oh, no, it's really easy. Here's how I do this. No one has said that yet. So y'all, if you're struggling with it, you are not alone. The next thing is to acknowledge that we are not enough on our own. We are not strong enough, smart enough, good looking enough, rich enough, whatever. We all need God's help. And I think this is something that comes easier as we get older. That's what I have found. Have you experienced that?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And it gets easier from the standpoint if you start to realize that a lot of those distractions that you thought were important when you were young are really not important. And when you start to block those things out, you really start to go, oh, okay, now I can actually hear and listen to what God's telling me versus all the other stuff in the world.
Yeah. And I think, when we're young, we have this sense of infallibility, invincibility, whatever. And I was always I can do this. I don't need any help. And now I'm like, oh gosh, I need help with everything. And I don't mind admitting that.
Right.
We do get some wisdom as we become older.
Yep.
The next thing is to remember it's about progress, not perfection. I think this is something that a lot of women struggle with. I think some men as well. I suspect more women than men. But I think as women, we tend to expect perfection. And we really are hard on ourselves when we're not. And again, I know some men do this as well. The good news is, I don't care, men or women, God does not expect us to be perfect. Thank goodness.
Right.
So that's a good thing.
Yep.
And then the last principle that I recommend is to really work on consciously changing our thoughts. Now, you work with people in a physical capacity, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I do mental and emotional. But I think that even with what you're doing, people's thoughts are hugely important. And I'm sure at times you work on helping them try to change those messages they're giving to themselves.
Absolutely. It's the biggest piece of the physical training is the mental that goes along with it.
Yeah. And I've worked with athletes before, like golfers, helping them improve their game, or baseball players. And for all of them, it's the mental is like, what they tell me is that's like 85 to 80% of it. They're like, I can do the physical. I've got that. It's what I'm telling myself, which I didn't know. So interesting. Okay. So I do have a verse for this podcast, which I think goes really well. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? And that is for all of us. Again, men and women, everybody. That is something that we have to remember. We are not the only temple. We are part of God's temple. It's not just us, thankfully. So, all right, let me start off with a quick prayer. Lord, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to people today. Thank you for letting Jerry guest on my podcast, because he does such great work with people. And I just ask that the things that we go over today will be helpful to our listeners. Amen. Okay, so my guest today, y'all, is Jerry Snyder. You also live in Hewitt, right? That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
And I see Jerry sometimes, especially in the summer, running, the roads around my neighborhood. And after growing up in Baton Rouge, you moved back to go to Texas A&M. And if people are watching on YouTube, you can see his little A&M sign. I commented on that before we started. Are those wine corks?
They are wine corks, yes.
I thought at first they were Scrabble tiles, and now I'm looking at them going, no, that's not what that is. Very cool. Did you make it, or did someone else make it?
No, I made it. Yeah.
Oh, so you are artsy, crafty as well.
It was pretty simple. I can stay within the lines.
Yeah, there you go. So you earned a degree in exercise physiology, and you also compete as a distance runner. And so you are now a certified life breakthrough coach. Did I
Yep.
say that right? Okay.
Yes.
And you believe in a really functional approach to solving problems. And I'm assuming a functional approach, you mean kind of uh, practical, doable. Is that what you're talking about or no?
Well, and making sure we get to the source, right? Like,
Yeah,
what's the source of the problem? Not just like, are we covering up the symptoms and moving on?
right. You're not wanting to put a band-aid on things.
Right. Right.
Got it. And that makes a lot of sense. Again, I was a family therapist for 28 years, so
Hmm.
I get that. A lot of times that's what we try to do. Let's
Yeah.
just do a quick fix, which is okay, but it doesn't get to the root of the problem. And what
Right.
may end up happening is the problem just comes back
Right.
and you keep dealing with it.
Yep.
So, okay, let's see. What else do I have for you? Um, you look at discovering and eliminating the true source of pain or whatever's holding people back more than treating the symptoms.
Hmm.
And you have been cited in articles, blog posts. You have a podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
Confidence through health.
Okay, hold on a minute. I can't hear you. I think
Oh,
that was me.
yeah. It's
And okay, I'm sorry. Say again your podcast.
Yeah. So it's Confidence Through Health is the title of it.
Confidence
It can
through
be
health.
found anywhere, anywhere you find podcasts.
Cool. Okay. You're an active volunteer at Central Texas Community.
Mhm.
You are a member of the City of Hewitt Parks and Beautification Board, work at your church or volunteer at your church, different community events. And I love because I'm a huge reader. I mean, I
Yeah.
read all the time. And you created the now annual event Running for Readers, all in
Yep.
with Jerry to raise money for the Hewitt Public Library by running all 250 plus streets in Hewitt, Texas. So have you
Yep.
run every street in Texas in Hewitt?
Yes. And it's like, because they've expanded so much in the past like 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it's more than like at first I think it was 258 the first time I did it, and now it's like close to 300 streets.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
getting bigger.
it's
I mean,
getting bigger, which makes it a little bit harder, but it's okay.
is there a
Um,
time period that you try to run those in for this
I
event?
just whenever I start it, I try to just do them all as quickly as I can through that, like from start to finish. And
Yeah.
so it usually usually I can get it done in a month.
Do you have other people who are also running all the streets with you, or is it just you?
It's just me. Sometimes I'll have people that'll come along with me for a couple of
Yeah.
streets or something, but yeah, it's just
And
me that's crazy
how
enough to
do
do all
you,
of them.
yeah, how do you raise money by that? Do people sponsor you for every street or something? How does that
Yeah,
work?
they sponsor, they donate. We started a 5K, so that'll be coming up in May, and so that helps as well. To people can sign up to run the 5K, and that money goes to benefit the library.
Nice.
And initially, the first year we did it, I did it because there were like almost zero business books, business-minded entrepreneurial books
Okay.
in the library, and I was like, okay, this is a need.
Yeah.
Um, in the first year, I think I want to say they bought 60 books the first year with the
That's
money
not
that was
bad.
raised. And then so they just increased it. And so now it's obviously expanded to other areas of the library as well that need help. So
Yeah. And Hewitt just built a new library, which is very, very nice because when I first
yeah.
moved here, I was going to the old library, which was good.
Oh gosh, yeah.
This one is really pretty. Yeah, I know. It's kind of a maze.
The old one was dark and dingy and
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yep.
It had books, which again, I'm a book lover. I love to read, so I was okay with
Right.
it. But this new one is really, really nice. So
Yep. Yep.
cool. Okay, tell us a little bit about the family that you grew up in, your family of origin. That's my
Mhm.
therapeutic background, and then your family now.
So I'm the second of five.
First of five.
Yep. So there's 3 girls, 2 boys.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I was born in Texas, grew up in Baton Rouge, uh, pretty sports minded, I
Yeah.
would say, family. Like, all of us were active in something, whether it was dance or soccer or running, um, water skiing,
Oh, wow.
so, I mean, it was a good upbringing. Obviously we had our troubles and our issues and,
What family
there's,
doesn't?
yeah. And so, but in college, like, and my grandparents were huge influences on my life, And in college, my grandmother went through heart problems and
Uh,
passed away about 6 months after like a quadruple bypass
mm,
and all this. And that's what actually led me to decide, because at the time I was undecided with my major. It was early on
yeah,
in college, and I was like, I think I want to help people with their health.
excellent.
So,
Yeah. Did your
um,
grandparents live near you so you guys saw them a lot?
no, we saw them maybe twice a year.
Okay.
We were in Baton Rouge, they were in Kingsville, Texas. So back then, with the speed limits the way they used to be,
Yeah.
it was a 10-hour drive. Um,
Wow.
and so, but usually I would spend, because there were 5 kids, usually two of us would go spend 2 or 3 months of the summer with the grandparents,
Nice.
and they'd split us up. And so I was always one of them, being the older boy. Uh,
Right.
and so I got to go help out and do the stuff around the house that
Yeah,
grandpa
yeah.
needed help with and
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
stuff. And so yeah, so I got to spend probably a lot more time with them because of that than most people do.
Yeah. Very
So
cool. All right. What about your family now?
so yeah, so my wife and I've been married. This year will be 24 years.
Congratulations. That's an
And
accomplishment today.
it is. It is. Yeah. And we've got 2 kids, 14 and 12, a boy and a girl. Both are adopted.
Okay.
And you know, they're a handful in their own way. You know, teenagers nowadays, it's a lot
Yeah.
different than being a teenager when we were teenagers.
Yes.
So, learning all the ins and outs of all the things that they're dealing with and how technology plays a part in it
So I have to
is a
ask you,
challenge.
yeah, your wife and your kids, are they really into health and fitness as well?
They are. My wife has done a dozen, maybe more triathlons over the
Oh,
past few
wow.
years.
That's impressive.
Um, it is, and she didn't grow up being an endurance person. She was a basketball player. She was a sprinter, but you know, there's fewer options as you get older, and so and then my daughter tried sports. She's not the sports minded. She's very artistic. She is in the band, and she
Okay.
does her own painting, and has actually raised money every year for her own like summer camps just through selling her paintings. So
Wow. Good for
she's pretty
her.
talented.
Yeah.
Uh, and my son is all athlete, taekwondo, and every sport that we can afford to get him into, he
Yeah.
plays. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
get that. Okay. So I wanted to back up a little bit. What is a certified life breakthrough coach? How do you become, how do you become that? And then
mhm.
what does that mean that you do with your clients?
I found an online academy, and that I was able to take a certification course on being a life coach. And so, and I picked this specific one because it's Christian based.
Yeah.
And so it's more about not just how do you live your life and become successful and break through all the different issues that are out there that everybody's dealing with, but how do you do that in a Christian mindset and following God and hearing His word, His advice, um, and one of the reasons why I decided to do that was because I was already coaching people on the athletic side and the
Mhm.
exercise side, and at the time I was starting to get into nutrition stuff, but learning how much of it is that mental and emotional breakthrough that you've got to get through. And so being able to have that background now to be able to say, okay, here's some of the things that we can put into place to try and handle the obstacles that are in your way so that you can
Yeah.
actually get yourself physically fit.
So you are really, I said before you're addressing people in the physical area, which you are, but you're also dealing with the spiritual.
Oh yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
great that you're integrating your faith into your practice. What do
Yep.
you do? I'm curious because I do the same thing in hypnosis. I offer faith-based hypnosis if people want it. Not
Right.
everybody does, and I'm
Not
okay with
everybody
it.
does. Right.
Yeah. And if they don't, I just give them a really good secular session. That's fine.
Right.
Do you do this? I mean, do you just give them that option or do most
Yeah.
people know? Okay.
Yeah. I've only had a few people that didn't,
Yeah.
dive into the spiritual side.
Yeah.
Most of them are okay with that and want that and see the benefit of that connection, because it's true. We're spiritual beings.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
you don't appreciate and bring that alongside your physical journey, then you're missing a piece
Yeah. A
of the
big,
puzzle, and it's you're going to hit a big obstacle along the way
yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I've had clients in the past who are very adamant. I don't want anything spiritual. And I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
that's fine. But sometimes I will ask, especially when I hear some of their story, do you mind if I pray for you? I have
Mhm.
never had anybody say, no, I don't want you praying for me. I think
Right.
it's like we all are open to any kind of help, even though that
Yep.
may not be our thing. But
Yep.
it's like no one wants to cross that off their list. Do you want to pray for me? Okay, that's fine.
Right. Right.
Okay, you've written a couple of books, so tell
Mhm.
us about those, please.
So the first one was entitled Confidence Through Health. And it's where the title for my podcast came from. And that one was really, I wrote it specifically to address all the myths that are out there that people struggle with. And so it really just it answers all the questions that are just common questions that people have. You know, what about this diet? What about that diet? Is it really as easy as calories in, calories out? How much do I exercise? Because,
Yeah,
you know, this place says to do this much, this
right.
organization says to do that much. Um, how do I do it? Is it all based on target heart rates, or is it based on, how much I sweat or how much weight I lose, all those different things, and that was really a divine, like it, that the book would it I wrote it in, I forget now, but I know it was somewhere around 2 weeks, like
Yeah,
the whole thing, like
wow,
just
that's
spit it
impressive.
out. And so I was like, yeah, this didn't come from me. This was God saying, write all these things down, because um I almost flunked English in high school. So like
Uh,
and
it's only your native
it showed,
language, Jerry, but yeah,
right? I
I
know
get it.
it showed when I got the edits back
Yeah.
from the first book, and I was like, oh, there's like, I think the first time I got the edits back, there were like 18,000 words or something like that, and there were 7,000 edits. And I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, then.
Like, so almost half the book's just trash. Like, okay, let's go.
Well, at least you were smart enough to get someone to edit it for you.
Right. Yeah. So I
Okay.
learned a lot about English and how you're supposed to write through that process.
Yeah.
Um, but then the second book is No More Sugarcoating, and it's a spin on that thought that you initially get of, oh, okay, you're going to tell me not to eat sugar, you're going to
Right.
tell me about my nutrition, and while that's a piece of the book really dives into taking the sugarcoating off your life,
Yeah,
because we tend to do that, and in
absolutely.
pretty much every area of our life, we sugarcoat ourselves. When we go to, work, we try to be this person at work, and
Mm-hmm.
we go to our family, out extended family gatherings or whatever, we try to be this person there. And it's like, just shed all that stuff and be who God wants you to be,
Yeah.
and be okay with that, and learn who that is. And if you don't know who that is, the book walks you through how to find who God wants you to be.
I think being authentic for a lot of people is difficult. And
Mhm.
that's something that I learned really early because my dad was a pastor and my parents were missionaries growing up. And I had a lot of friends who also were PKs, preachers' kids. And they
Mhm.
would say, yeah, my dad says one thing in the pulpit, but boy, at home, he's a different person. And I was like,
Right.
no, my dad is pretty much the same. What you see there is what we see at home. And I
Right.
realized how important that is to just be authentic.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, but a lot of people struggle with that.
They do, and it shows also in the athletes that I work with and the people that I work with for both nutrition and exercise. It
Yeah,
shows because, and it shows in my wife. Like, she had a struggle with it when I first started doing this, because she was like, "Well, okay, I understand when we go out to eat and we're in Waco, like you have to eat a certain way, but when we're on vacation in some town there, nobody knows who you are.
yeah,
Can't you just eat whatever you want?" And I'm like, "No,
yeah,
this is who I am, and I
right.
eat this way because this is who I want to be later on in life.
Yeah,
So no, I'm not going to change from that." And um, it was a struggle for her at first to see that and go through that, but now she's, not only is she used to it, she's starting to like
yeah,
do that as well, and understand that, like, no, I don't have to, just because I'm around my high school friends, I don't have to dive back into the way we
right.
used to do things back then.
And eat Fruit Loops or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
So this was not on the list of questions I gave you, but I'm going to deviate a little bit.
Yeah.
I get clients a lot who they tell me they want to stop eating sugar. Okay, which is great because sugar causes inflammation, which is huge and causing pain, all those things. But my approach, and I'm curious to see what you do, I always ask them, okay, are you wanting to cut sugar out completely? Because you can't, it's in everything. Or are you just wanting to cut down significantly? And I'll work with the second one. But if they
Right.
want to do the first one, that's like, you're setting yourself up for failure. You can't do it. That's
Right.
my viewpoint. How do you address that?
Well, so I, if they're open to it, I dig into the biology and the science a little bit
Okay.
because everything that you eat, every single morsel that you consume is broken down into sugar for your body to use it. And so it's broken down into glycogen. Um, but eventually it gets to glycogen, I should say. So, but first it's either fructose, which comes from natural sugars from
Right.
fruits and vegetables or anything that has a natural sugar to it, or glucose, which is the processed side of it. Um, but even if you eat, like even for the people that are on a carnivore diet, all they're eating is meat and like that's okay. It's protein. Oh, it's good for us
Right.
because it's protein, but that protein still has to be broken down to glycogen for us to be able to actually use it in the cell. Um, and so you can't get rid of it because your
Yeah.
body's trying to create it.
Yeah.
And so what you got to do is go, okay, I need to get rid of the bad sources of it. And
Yeah.
so then you can go, okay, well, and one of the things is like I try to get people to like, okay, well, let's just do this. Let's eat if you're craving sugar, let's eat some fruits, let's eat some vegetables, let's eat
Mhm.
something that's got natural sugar in it. It'll sustain you for a longer period of time that from that craving from
Right.
kicking in. And typically people go, oh, I'm starting to see what you mean. Like I can't get rid of sugar, but I can
Yeah.
get rid of processed sugar.
That's a good way to put it. I hadn't thought about that. So it sounds like we really are on the same page. We're just expressing
Mhm.
it differently. I like that.
Yeah.
Processed sugar. People get
Yeah.
that, I think.
Yeah. And
Okay.
the scary thing, like this is way off, but like
That's
since
okay.
I mentioned meat and protein and the people getting it there, and I actually experienced this a long time ago. I used to work for a company that before I was doing the exercise and health stuff, I used to work for a company that did uniform rentals. And one of our clients, I went out and visited, and they were way out in the country, like in the middle of nowhere, just like country manufacturing plant, just and they made cattle feed, and what they made it out of was all the expired candy from the store.
Oh my gosh.
And so every candy that you can think of that has an expiration date on it, Nerds, Almond Joys, Starburst, Skittles, wrappers and all, were going into this thing. They were all being melted down into one big thing. They were putting other stuff in with it, like as far as like they were
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
some vitamins or stuff, but the basis of the supplement that they were creating was all processed sugar.
So
And that's been
that
going
was
into
in
the
your
cattle feed.
hamburger that you thought was protein. Oh my
Right.
gosh.
And so that's one of the reasons why, if from a research standpoint, there's been a lot of stuff coming out over the last year about like, in the people on the carnivore side of things have been arguing that like, no, 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 that's not true. That's not true. And like, if you get true grass fed,
Hmm. Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's
Beef.
been taken care of and you know where it's coming from and they're not giving anything
Yeah,
crazy to it, that meat's probably fine for you. But if you're getting something from a fast food chain or,
yeah. Yeah.
something that's been in that side of the
Mm.
the manufacturing food processing side of it, that's going to increase your diabetes and increase your sugar because that's what they're feeding those cattle.
I had no idea.
Mhm.
Learn something new every day.
So it's
Mhm.
scary. It's scary.
Yeah, yeah,
And that I saw that with my own eyes
yeah.
almost 20 years ago. So it's been going on for a long time.
And it's especially scary when you really think you are doing the right thing and trying to eat healthy, and then you find out no,
Yep.
because that's what's in the meat that you're getting.
Right.
That's
Right.
frustrating.
It is. It
And I
is.
guess it's cheaper for the food companies to do it that way.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's all about money, honey.
Yep.
Okay, switching tactics a little bit. You had a pretty severe injury a while back that required some
Yep.
extensive physical therapy. Tell us about that,
Mhm.
please.
So, and this was right. It's funny because it was right when I started to launch my business,
Of
and
course.
I had been laid off, and God had been calling me for a while. I've been doing it on the side, like just
Yeah.
helping people a little bit here and there. Um, not, I mean, I charged a little bit, but it wasn't even, it was just sort of like, oh, okay, sure, pay me for this. It's fine, no
Yeah.
big deal. It's just extra income. Um, and then I was laid off, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I should do this, maybe I shouldn't. So I dove into it, and 2 months later, water skiing, and I had started to get back in shape, and I started to do all these things from a health standpoint to get myself better, to be a better role model if I was going to
Right.
do this as a living. And water skiing, and I decided to try a trick I'd never tried before, and it was a wake helicopter. So I'm on trick skis, which you can spin around on and everything, and jump the wake and do a 360 in the air and land, and I made it about 310 instead of 360. And the ski
Oh,
didn't come off, and so my knee buckled and gave way. So I tore my PCL completely, which is the ligament in the back of the knee.
yeah.
And 90, they estimate 90 to 95% of my MCL is torn. So I joke that when I run a race, I'm like, okay, especially if I run a race and I don't win, um, then I'm like, I joked that I'm like, yeah, but I was the fastest guy with 2 1/4 ligaments.
There you go.
So
So if those are
um,
torn, can they be repaired? I mean, what happens?
they can, but they don't necessarily need to be,
Okay.
because the PCL, it's now my knee can do crazy things. Like I can move it around on it
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and make people, yeah,
Well,
get sick.
I don't need
Uh,
that picture. Thank you.
but from and if I do something where it's like if I'm doing a lot of agility side to side movement, then I have a brace that I wear. Um,
Okay.
but I saw multiple doctors, and the last one I saw that like I really was like, okay, that's the last thing I need to know. That's good. Was the I went back to the team doctor at Texas A&M where I ran, and I said, all right, here's the deal. Like surgery, not surgery. I had one doctor say yes, one doctor say no. And he
Yeah.
was like, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to run. He goes, okay, well, as long as it doesn't hurt, it's not hindering you if you're running in a straight line.
Yeah.
He said,
True.
if you're going to do trails, you're going to do anything that's like got a lot of turns and weaves and
Yeah.
stuff, wear your brace. But other than that, he goes, unless you slip and fall on it,
Yeah.
you're fine.
Okay.
So, so you usually won't see me running if it's super wet or
Yeah.
icy.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, like there's no issue with it. But yeah, it was an extensive, probably, I think I went to rehab for 5 months,
Okay.
two or
Just
three times a week.
yeah, strengthening things and that type. Okay.
Yep. Yep. Because I lost a lot of muscle.
Yeah, that
Because
makes
obviously you have to keep it, you have to keep it immobile at first. And then of course you're trying to teach everything to come back together and everything. Um, and yeah, so I probably lost about an inch and a half in circumference around my quad
oh,
compared to the other
a
one.
lot.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of muscle that I lost.
So did that accident, that whole incident, did that kind of help you decide, yes, I need to be doing this full time? Because you said at the time you were kind of wavering about whether you should do it or not.
Yeah, it did it sort of pushed me to say, okay, well now you've got more than just the natural ability, right? And that was one of the things that it was at first it was like, okay, well, people are going to say like, oh, but you're just naturally gifted, or you're naturally thin, or you're naturally whatever. And I'm like, okay, well now I have an obstacle and I have a challenge.
Go. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and it really, it especially works really well when I have a high school athlete that I'm working with, and they're like, "Oh, I can't do this. I don't want to do this, or it's too hard." And I'll sit down and take my knee and start moving it around and go, "Do you think this is hard? Like
Yeah.
and this is how much I run every day." And they usually just go like, "Okay, I'll shut up and do it."
And I think that's a good example, Jerry, of how so often God uses our weaknesses a lot more than our strengths.
Yep.
We think that we need the strengths to,
Mhm.
go out and do things for him. And he's like,
Yep.
no, I need you
Yeah.
right where you are.
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great example. Okay. So do you work with men or women or both? Any particular ages? Kind of tell us about that.
Both. And I've worked with people from like 8, 9 years old all the way up to I think my oldest client was 89 years old.
Really? I think
Mhm.
that's great.
Yep. And I've got one right now. He's mid 70s
Okay.
and been working with him for a couple of months. And he came to me for a little bit of exercise, but more nutrition and weight loss. And when he started, he's probably got 80 to 100 pounds to lose, and but didn't want to retire. And he's like, I know if I don't change something now, I'm going to be forced to retire because my body's not going to let me do it anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's smart too.
And in the first, he was surprised because the first month and a half to 2 months, all I worked on was just really his balance. It's like, we just got to get your balance right. Like,
Yeah.
you have no balance, you're a fall risk. And if you want to keep working, like,
Yeah.
you fall, break your hip at your age, it's
Yeah.
pretty much the end of the story. Um, in your age and your physical condition. And now he's walking upstairs without grabbing onto anything to help support, and like
Excellent.
doing all kinds of great stuff. And so yeah, so the older people, and he's told me, he's like, I couldn't believe that you started with balance. I thought for sure you were going to come in and start doing, weightlifting and
Yeah.
cardio and like, let's just get the weight off. And so he was shocked by that. And that he's tried other, avenues, and nobody addressed balance. And so he was like, I was surprised that you met me where I was. And I said, well, that's
But
the key.
yeah, for older people, that's such a thing. When my dad, before he passed away, he was like 90 when he died.
Mhm.
And the last several years, I can't tell you how many times he fell
Mhm.
and
Yep.
ended up having to go to the emergency room. And, and it's
Mhm.
it's a huge deal. So
Yeah.
good for you for recognizing it.
Yeah. And
So
so that's what I try and do is, no matter the age, is just meet you where you're at. And so,
yes,
and that could be different. It could be, a 20-year-old female could be at the same, from a body physical standpoint, the same position as a 60-year-old male,
yeah,
depending on how they've lived their life and what they've gotten to at that
yeah,
point. Like,
because
and
we're all
so you can't just say you're a 20-year-old female, you're supposed to be able to do this, go do that.
right.
Like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it, but it's not going to work out terribly well. So,
Right.
what are some of the most common issues that people bring to you that you work with them on?
Uh, well, unfortunately, balance is pretty common for a lot of
Okay.
people. Um, and it's because they have gotten away from exercise, and they've gotten away from doing things,
Yeah.
and you don't realize how much balance you lose when you just simply, you wake up, you get ready as fast as you can to
Mm,
go sit in your car, to drive to work, to sit at your desk,
yeah.
to maybe get up at lunch, to sit back down at your desk, to drive home, to maybe work around the kitchen for an hour or whatever, and then sit at the sofa and then go to bed. Like, doing that, you're limiting your body and your physical ability and how much movement you have, and you lose your balance really quickly.
I
Um,
think the sedentary lifestyle that so many people have is just a killer.
yeah.
It just is.
Yep.
And I sit at my desk where I am here in my office a lot because I
Mhm.
see clients and then I do a lot of writing. So I make sure I get up at least once an hour to
Mhm.
walk around the building, the hallways, go to the bathroom, come back just to get myself going because I'm not comfortable sitting that long. I get
Yeah.
tired of it. But
Yeah.
a lot of people, that's their normal.
Yeah. And
So
and they don't realize, especially, that how much balance plays a factor in, and one of the reasons that I lost my grandmother early. I say early, I was 21. And so that's a big driver for me, is like, okay, well, I want people to be able to enjoy their grandkids,
yes,
right?
yes.
And for the grandkids to enjoy their grandparents, like,
Mm.
because you don't know how long you're going to have. And when you're a grandparent and you can no longer pick up your grandchild to give them a hug,
Oh
or
yeah.
you can't bend down to get at their level, like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
right? Like that's a problem that I take very seriously. And so like teaching people to be able to do those things
Hmm.
and not do it in a like and definitely not be like, oh, I'm sorry, Katie, I can't get down there. Can you get up on the sofa and get in my lap? I can't get down to pick you up. Like that's a problem.
Yeah. And I get that because I have a little 2.5-year-old grandson and a little
Hmm.
granddaughter on the way. Yeah, and I can't imagine. Now, I will say my grandson is pretty chunky, and the last time
Hmm.
I picked him up, I couldn't carry him for very long. So I'm like,
Yeah.
he's heavy. I mean,
Yeah.
he just is. But I could pick
Yeah.
him up. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the meat of what I want to talk about.
Hmm.
You know, we both know that exercise is really important. And I think I was saying, like, everybody in this country probably knows that. However, I should have looked up the statistics. I know most people don't work out regularly.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They just don't. Why is that? We know we should.
Mhm.
Why do you think people don't do it?
Well, and I'm because I looked up that statistic for one of my books, and I'm trying to remember this a couple years ago, but I want to say the research showed, and so it's probably worse now than it was
Yeah, I'm
then,
sure it is.
that it was over 60% of people knew that they needed to do something to fix their health.
Yeah,
Not that the 75 plus percent that's overweight or obese, but 60% knew that they need to do something, but only like it's less than 30% are actually trying to do something. So there's a big gap there of like, okay, I know something, but I'm still not even doing. Um, and not to mention the people that, you know, are ignoring the fact that yes, they need to do something about it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of it, especially for people in my generation, the Generation X, maybe a little bit of the younger boomer generation, a lot of it stems from the way we were taught things in school
oh, okay.
and in like in general sports. Because truly the stuff that was really good for us from an exercise standpoint was used as a punishment, right? In
Yeah, that's
PE
true.
class, if y'all acted up too loud, you got to, okay, everybody's got to run,
Yeah, go run laps.
right? And it's like, oh, I don't want to run laps. I just want to play dodgeball.
Yeah,
Okay, well, no, you got to go run laps. And so what happens when you get older? Well, there's no, I mean, there are, but there are very few dodgeball leagues for older
yeah,
people,
yeah.
right? And so one of the most common things is, well, you go walk or you go run or you go bike or you go do an
Right.
endurance type of exercise for your cardiovascular health. And you immediately go, oh, but that's a punishment. Like,
Yeah,
why would I want to do that? I'm being punished. Why am I
that's
punishing
ingrained.
myself?
Yeah, yeah, that's the
And so
perception.
it's that psychological piece of it, um, that you revert back to going, oh, I don't want to do that because that was when I was in trouble. Why am I in
Yeah,
trouble?
yeah, yeah.
And it's hard to overcome that. And a lot of I remember both from both from football, from soccer, it's okay, well, maybe it's not run laps, maybe it's okay, well, drop and give me 20 push-ups because you did something wrong,
Right.
right? And so it's like, oh, well, why would I want to do push-ups in my house, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah,
going to do that.
I didn't do anything wrong.
I didn't, why would I want to get up and do push-ups? No, I'm not going to do that. And it's like, okay, well, and that's one of the key indicators of how healthy you are is can you do push-ups,
Yeah,
and push your body off the ground, um, which is also one of the like just the basic things that you need if you do happen to trip and fall.
right.
You gotta,
Yes, yes.
can you push yourself up the ground and get back up?
Get up. So what you're saying is you feel like most people, because of early conditioning, they have a
Mhm.
negative perception of exercise.
Yep.
I hadn't thought about that, but I think that makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, we tend to
And
not do things that we perceive as negative.
right. And every year I get the same. There's a friend of mine who posts this every time it shows up. She shares the memory every time of there's a meme of like, uh, somebody who's doing sit-ups, and they're like, why would I want to do a sit-up? And it's, the trainer's sitting there yelling at them. And they're like, I just want to sit up and eat a donut. The trainer's like, no, you can't have a donut. Like, um, and it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to do a sit-up then if I can't get a donut.
Yeah.
What's the reward? And it's like, oh, because we tied everything to a reward system and also to a punishment system,
Yeah.
and so it's like the reward is if I can do sit-ups, I get better health,
Right.
right? And I'm stronger and I can do more things without getting hurt, going to the ER,
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that. Um, where it's, the opposite is what actually we wind up playing out.
Well, so punishment, exercise is more perceived as punishment because
Mhm.
especially if you haven't done it, it does feel painful short
Oh
term.
yeah, yeah,
And even though we know up here in our heads that yes, there is a reward, the reward can be a long way down the
yes,
road. And
yes,
so we're more into short-term reward. I want the
right.
reward immediately, and that does not happen with exercise.
No, not usually. And especially if you are not early in life conditioned to be an athlete or
Yeah,
um, involved in sports or anything like that, and you can't relate any of the actual activity to, oh well, this, eventually I'll get to feel that feeling of euphoria when my team won whatever,
right,
or
right.
and if you were never involved in those things, then it makes it even more difficult
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
correlate that.
yeah. One of the other things I wanted to ask you, when people do start working out, a lot of times they make mistakes, which
Mhm.
make it harder. And the example that I'm familiar with that I'll give is I know a lot of guys who they were active in high school or college. Okay.
Mhm.
Then they got out of college, started working, not active at
Right.
all. And then something happens. Okay, I've got to start working out. What do? They go run 10 miles the first day.
Hmm. Hmm.
They kill themselves. They can't move the
Right.
next day. And so they say, exercising is terrible. This is a
Right.
horrible idea. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yep.
They kind of jump in. What
Yep.
I see that as a mistake. What they don't take it slowly and realistically enough.
Right. Right.
What are some other mistakes that you see people making once they do start working out?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the biggest one is you still think that you're 22 years old. And so like of course my body, is supposed to do this and I can go do that. And the unfortunate thing about if you've been away from it for that long is your body doesn't necessarily always tell you immediately, hey, stop because this is bad. You
Yeah.
can push yourself through
Oh
because your
yeah.
body's going, oh, hey, okay. It's not until you stop in your body, all the, lactic acid buildup and all the different recovery things and all that, and your muscles start to then go, oh, I think you overdid it.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's taking whatever you think is reasonable, even if you're like, okay, I know I'm going to go slow, I'm going to cut this down.
Right.
I'm only going to start with, a 2 mile walk. Okay, well, if that's what you think you need to start with, cut it in half.
Okay. Yeah.
Like even go slower and to the point. And I tell people when I first start working with them, I'm like, if I make you sore
Yeah.
to where you say, I don't want to see this guy again, I said that's a critical sign that I messed up in reading how
Yeah.
poorly out of shape you are when we start.
Yeah.
Um, should you be a little bit uncomfortable and maybe like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I worked out yesterday? Sure. But you should still be able to get out of bed. You
Right.
should still be able to walk around. Um, you should feel like you did something,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
But
not have that discomfort to that level.
a little discomfort versus extreme pain. Extreme
Correct.
pain is a sign that you really overdid it. And
Yep.
you're not going to want to do it again, probably.
Right. Right. And another big thing that people don't, especially as the older you are when you start back up, um, and if you're starting back up because of a health scare, say, because most health scares are both exercise and nutrition related. So you haven't necessarily been feeding your body the best ingredients.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
get to this point and you go, okay, well, now I need to start exercising. Well, you also got to make sure you have the right fuel as you
Your
start.
body. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so, supplementing with the right vitamins. And I say like in an almost overdosing standpoint, like because your body's probably in that situation going to have some clogged issues. The
Hmm.
receptors aren't going to be receiving things as well.
Yeah.
And so you've got to go like, okay, let me make sure there's enough calcium, there's enough vitamin B, there's enough vitamin A. Make sure there's enough stuff in there um, to make sure that my muscles can actually operate properly.
Yeah, you have to correctly fuel your body so that you can go
Right.
do the things that you want to do.
Yep.
When we're talking about reasons why people don't exercise, I did not, I went for about 10 or 15 years, no exercise
Hmm.
at all,
Hmm.
except getting up and walking around the house. And the reason I, this was before I got into hypnosis and all the mindset and all this stuff,
Hmm.
but I realized at one point there were two reasons why I was not exercising. It's because of the things I was telling myself. Two things. One is I hate to work out, and
Hmm.
the other was I hate being hot and sweaty. And
Yep.
so I realized that one day and I said, okay, Melissa, you got to stop that. Those are both true, but they are not helpful. And so
Right.
I had to figure out how to give myself other messages. And I knew I could not say, oh, I love working out. I love getting hot and
Yeah.
sweaty. I would laugh hysterically. There's no way. But what I
Yeah.
did start saying is, I love how I feel after I finish working out.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
love what exercising does for my body.
Right.
So for me, oh, and now I'm 66. I've been working out, gosh, regularly for probably 20, 25 years. I would not even recognize myself back there.
Yeah.
But it's just a whole different ball game. And it's
Mhm.
directly because of the messages that I've been giving myself.
Yeah, and that's a big key is and I tell this to my athletes too. I'm like, because a lot of my athletes that are, especially that are runners, um, they'll get into a mile race or a 5K race and they'll hit the point where they're like, I mean, there's pain, there's discomfort, there's the I want to quit, I want to slow down, like I can't do this, all those types of thoughts that come in. And being an athlete, I can tell you, like those
Sure, of
absolutely
course.
will come in,
Yeah.
even to the most seasoned
Yep.
athlete.
Yep.
Like those thoughts come in because you're hopefully trying to push yourself to be a better athlete. And so you're going to be pushing yourself as hard as you can. And so it's not, and some of my athletes, I can say like, okay, well, we're going to get to that point. We're going to embrace that thought and say, we're going to push you as far as we can down the road. That works with some people. Some
Right.
people are like, no, I'm,
Mhm.
I'm going to, I'm going to give up.
Yeah.
Okay. What about after the race? Like, okay, 2 minutes after the race, have you ever died? Like you haven't because you're still here talking to me, right? 5 minutes after the race, typically you're just walking around talking to people, right? Okay.
Exactly.
So we know as hard as you're going to push yourself, you're still going to be okay
Yeah. You'll recover.
afterwards. Like
Yeah.
you're going to bounce back. Everything's going to be okay. And that works for some people to be able to say, okay, while I feel like in the moment, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to survive. Reality is you've probably only got about 5 or 6 minutes left of that feeling.
Right.
And so 10 minutes from that point, you're going to be fine again. Like,
Yeah.
can
That's
you
a
can
good
you
way to,
make can you make 10 minutes of your life,
yeah, yeah.
you know? And it becomes more of a mental game
Right.
of can I control myself and my fears and my anger, my, all those things and push my body beyond because your body will do it if you tell it to.
Yeah. And one of the things I always try to encourage people is it is never too late to start working out. It just
Correct.
isn't.
Correct.
And I told you I'm 66. I work out several times a day. I usually
Hmm.
average 18 to 20,000 steps a day.
Hmm.
I'm very active. And whenever I check stats, I'm like at the top of my age group as far
Right.
as activity.
Hmm.
So a couple of years ago, I was in a run, like just a 5K, and I'm a very slow runner. Always have
Hmm.
been, even in my 20s, very slow, very even. I
Right.
just don't run fast, but I finish
Hmm.
it. So I finished the race, and I was, talking to some people, and someone said, "Oh, I think they're looking for you." And I'm like, "Really? Why?" "Well, you won an award." And I'm like, "I did? I mean, I never win anything." And so I went
Yeah.
and looked. Sure enough, I came in first in my category because I
Yeah.
was the only woman my age in my category. So I was like, okay, I'll take it. You
It pays
know,
off. Yeah.
I still have the medal. But
Right.
it really is never too late. And I
No.
do, because I'm not a fast runner. I don't know if you're familiar with, and now I can't think of his name. Jeff Galloway.
Yeah.
He developed the run, walk, run method. I
Yep.
used that for
Yep.
years, and I do
Yep.
30-30s. I run for 30 seconds, I walk for 30 seconds, run 30,
Hmm.
walk 30. And that works really well for me. And I
Yep.
think a lot of times men, especially, they try to push themselves too much, too hard.
Hmm.
And if they would just slow it down a little bit, they'd
Hmm.
probably be able to finish a lot more things. You can always speed up more
Oh yeah.
later.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that it is whether it's the machoism factor for guys, um, or you know, and part of it is the old athlete that comes out.
Yes. Yes.
And I can use my father-in-law as an example because he did this a couple years ago, even though I'm doing what I'm doing, but he doesn't live near us
Yeah.
and he wanted somebody in person. And I'm like, okay. And so they joined a little gym in their area. And so he went in and of course my wife and I both were sending advice like, okay, don't do this, don't do too much. Make
Right.
sure
Right.
you like just ease into this
Yeah.
because he had been sedentary for a long time. And he goes in and the 24-year-old trainer that he
Mm.
got says, okay, well, did you ever play any sports? And he goes, oh yeah, in high school I was all district lineman. And he goes, oh okay, lineman, okay. And like he's 6'1", 6'2", big guy, but big guy right now because he's overweight.
Yeah. Right.
And starts the guy goes, okay, well let's start with the bench press and puts all this weight on there. And you know, the next day, we're asking, well, how'd your workout go? Well, I think I tore a muscle in my arm, so I'm not going back.
Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
like, what did you do? He's like, well, he put like 200 pounds on the bench press. I'm like, what in the world are you thinking? Like, so, as you're an older, especially if you're an older person getting back into is have your like, your alarm meter on of like, okay, this doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Like, if
Exactly.
this sounds like something I could have done back when I was an athlete, and I know I'm not in that shape now. Like I
Yeah.
can kid myself, but I know I'm not in that shape now. I'm like that should be a big alarm if somebody's saying, "Oh, go
Yeah.
do this." Like, and so like that's especially if somebody was getting into, and a lot of women in there, because in the most popular category in a 5K or a triathlon is the female 35 to 50 age bracket.
Yeah.
So most you've had your babies, you want to
Right.
get back in shape.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, I've got to do something. And we need a goal, and that's great. And so it's the most competitive age bracket to get into. And for a lot of people, that competition of trying to get an award
Yeah.
pushes us beyond
Yeah.
where we're actually capable of at the moment. And so we've got to put the reins on and go, okay, I'm a different person starting this new journey out.
Yeah. One of the things that I recommend to a lot of people who want to start exercising, especially if they haven't for a long time, and I don't know if you do this, but one is swimming or any type of
Mhm.
water exercise. Because I grew up on swim teams, and
Mhm.
water is it's so easy on all your joints,
Yep.
everything. And the other is a rebounder. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mhm.
those. I
Mhm.
have used
Yep.
rebounders for years and
Yep.
love them. And it's a little round trampoline indoors. I
Yep.
ran on it this morning because again, it doesn't hurt your joints. And as we get
Right.
older, that can
Yep.
be a huge issue.
Yep.
And you mentioned balance. A lot of rebounders you can get with a balance bar that
Mhm.
you can hang on to if
Right.
that's an issue. So, are
Yep.
there any things that you recommend to people who have not exercised for a long time as a way of kind of getting back into it?
Yeah, I mean, walking, swimming, or biking
Yeah,
are all great things. And not necessarily biking outdoors, but stationary bike.
sure.
So you don't have to worry about falling over,
Right.
um, or hills or anything
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Like and and I always put swimming third on that list because like if you get tired and you're in the middle of the pool and it's deep enough, you can't
yeah,
necessarily just stop.
yeah.
But walking, you can always stop,
Exactly.
right? If you're on an exercise bike or walking on a
Yeah,
treadmill, you can just stop.
yeah, exactly.
And
And
so
sit down for a
doing
bit.
something that when you get to that point, you can just go, it's not a matter of like, oh my gosh, I'm 2 miles from home. I still got to get home.
Yes. That's
You
what I
know,
tell people about rebounding all the time. You can just pause the TV and you can sit down for a few minutes. And
right.
I think that's a lot smarter than just to keep going until you exhausted yourself.
Yep.
Okay. We are actually longer than I thought we'd be already. We could probably talk for a long time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. If people want to get in touch with you, I'm sure you have a website, or Facebook. Tell us how they can do that, please.
So two websites they can go to, allinhealthandwellness.com
Okay.
or for the podcast, confidencethroughhealth.com. And all my, ways to get a hold of me, email address and social medias and all that are on there. All in Health and Wellness is for both Facebook, Instagram. So anything you want to look up and follow me, that's where to go.
So that's how they find you on social media.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. I always give a few fun facts about Waco or just Texas in general podcast. So the first one for this one is during the period of July 24th through 26th, 1979, Tropical Storm Claudette brought 45 inches of rain to an area near Alvin, Texas, and that was in 3 days, contributing to more than $600 million in damages. I mean, we've had a lot of rain lately, but thankfully nothing like that. Claudette produced the United States 24-hour rainfall record of 43 inches. That is a heck of a lot of rain.
Wow.
That's a lot. Second, and I didn't realize this, Texas is the only state that entered the United States by treaty instead of by territorial annexation. I was not aware of that. And then I knew this one. Texas was an independent state from 1836 to 1845. So we were just our own country. Okay, so thank you all so much for listening today. Along with Waco Hypnosis Center, I'm available for public speaking. I do have this podcast. And if y'all have any questions, you can reach me. I always have to look it up because I don't email myself at info@drmelissarich.com. My website is www.drmelissarich.com. And Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today. This was so fun. You added a lot, and I hope that this was helpful to people.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Everybody have a good day. Thanks, Jerry.